The scream came from the mourning tent before the burial prayers had even finished. One moment, the funeral gathering for Elder Kwon, held in the grand reception hall of the Seo family compound, attended by 200 people in dark clothes who had come to pay their respects to the chairman's oldest mentor, had been holding its silence. The kind of silence that funerals in powerful families always hold, grief performing itself at a controlled volume. The next moment, Chairman Daniel Seo pushed his seat back so hard it scraped across the stone floor. His hand went to his throat. His water glass slipped from his fingers and shattered. The sound of it breaking cut through the low murmur of condolences like something sharp. "Chairman," one of the senior managers shouted. Vice Chairwoman Beatrice Seo, the chairman's wife, rose from her seat so fast that her silk-wrapped dress brushed against the funeral table. Her face was drained of color. "Daniel." Director Sandra Seo, the eldest daughter and head of brand strategy, froze with her pen halfway to the page. Director Linda Seo, the second daughter, stood up and began to tremble. Director Rita Seo looked from her father to the glass of water in front of her as if she had just understood something terrible. The youngest daughter, Anna Mensah, not a Seo, not by blood, not by marriage, not by any title the family had ever thought to give her, moved first. She rushed toward the chairman with a fresh glass from the side cabinet, her hand steady even when everything else in the room was not. The chairman slapped it away. "Don't." The room went still. That one word changed everything. No one looked at the chairman again. They all looked at the water. Then they looked at the woman sitting near the service table by the far wall. She was not staff. She was not a colleague. She was a gray-haired woman in deep mourning clothes, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes red from weeping that everyone in the room had assumed was grief for her husband, Elder Kwon, whose funeral this was. Whose body still lay in the next room. Whose death, as it was now beginning to dawn on several people simultaneously, had not been peaceful. Her name was Mrs. Kwon Soon-jae. She was 71 years old. And she had prepared the chairman's refreshment herself, an hour before the service began, in the kitchen of a house that was not hers, because she had insisted, with the insistence of a grieving widow that no one wanted to refuse, that she be the one to do it. The security team turned to her before anyone gave an order. She did not step back. She sat very still. "I did nothing." "Hold her," the chairman said. 2 men crossed the room. The sight of security personnel moving toward a grieving grandmother sent a ripple of shock through the assembled mourners. People began to rise. Whispers broke out. Beatrice pressed her fingers to her mouth. Sandra's expression hardened into something cold and executive. Linda whispered a prayer under her breath. Anna stood where she was, watching Mrs. Kwon with the stillness of someone who already knows that the next few minutes will not be simple. "Mrs. Kwon, what is this?" "It is not what you think." Her voice was frail but composed. "I did not poison anyone." "You are lying," Sandra said. "I did not," the old woman's voice broke. "I swear I did not." But the chairman's hand was still at his throat, and the rage that had entered his face was not the kind that listens. Daniel Seo was not a small man. He had built Seo Mirai Beauty from a mid-tier domestic brand into one of the most recognized luxury houses in Asia. He had done it through precision, through control, through an authority that makes other powerful people lower their eyes when he enters a room. Standing in anger now, he looked like a structure that had finally stopped pretending to be still. "I trusted you," he said, each word placed like something heavy being set down. "I trusted you with my health. I trusted you with my wife's mourning. I trusted you to stand in this room every day and do no harm." He looked at her across the hall, across the rows of mourners and the funeral flowers and the incense still burning for a man who had just been buried. "If what you gave me is clean, drink it." Mrs. Kwon's face changed. It was just a flicker, but every person in that room saw it. Linda covered her mouth. Rita stepped back from the table. Anna stood still, and for the first time in that room, real fear entered her chest. Not the fear of what had almost happened. The fear of what was now becoming undeniable. "Drink it," the chairman repeated. Mrs. Kwon shook her head. "Drink it." She began to cry. Beatrice's voice broke. "Mrs. Kwon, tell us the truth." The old woman dropped her face into her hands. The whole room fell silent except for her weeping. At first she still tried to hold the story together. Maybe it entered the water by mistake, maybe someone tampered with the tray before she brought it up, maybe someone in this very house was trying to destroy her. But the more she spoke, the weaker the words became. Sandra stepped forward, her face the face she wore in difficult negotiations. "Why are you crying like this if you are innocent?" Mrs. Kwon did not answer. Rita's voice rose. "Say something." Linda pointed with a trembling hand. "What did my father ever do to you?" Mrs. Kwon looked up. Her eyes were red, but they were no longer full of fear alone. They were full of something older than fear. Something that had been kept in a dark room for a very long time and had finally found a door. "I did it." No one moved. "I put something in his water." Beatrice collapsed back into her chair. Anna turned to look at Mrs. Kwon as if she no longer recognized the woman sitting there. Sandra's expression shifted from cold to shocked. Rita made a sound that was not quite a word. "Why?" Sandra asked. Mrs. Kwon let out a laugh that sounded nothing like laughter. "Because this man is not innocent," she said, looking directly at the chairman. "This man took everything from my family before I was old enough to understand what everything meant." The chairman's eyes narrowed. He said nothing. Mrs. Kwon went on, her voice growing stronger now, the way a wound sounds when it finally tears open after years of trying to stay closed. "My husband worked for this company 40 years ago, when it was still small. He discovered that money was being moved, accounts that should not have existed, names that appeared nowhere in the official records. He reported it. He went to the right people. He did everything an honest man is supposed to do. And then this man had him labeled a thief and dismissed without reference. My husband could not find work again. I took 3 jobs. I raised our children in shame that was not ours to carry. And then my husband died last week. Quietly. Without anyone in this building ever saying his name with the honor it deserved. And this man came to his funeral to be seen grieving, and I decided." She stopped. Linda whispered, "Oh God." I waited. I found my moment. I came in through the kitchen of his own mentor's house. She looked at the chairman. I told myself that one day I would stand this close to the man who ruined my husband and he would feel even a fraction of what we felt. Rita stared at her. "You came to this funeral for revenge?" "Yes." "Then the truth is out." The security men looked shaken. The room had the atmosphere of something that had just cracked along a line nobody knew was there. Then the chairman spoke. His voice was quieter than before. Somehow it was more frightening. "You have carried poison in your heart for a very long time, Mrs. Kwon, and the saddest part is that you do not know the full story." She frowned through her tears. "What story?" "Your husband was not the honest man you raised your children to believe he was." Mrs. Kwon's breathing changed. The accounts he reported were accounts he had helped create. He came forward only after he understood that the investigation was going to reach him anyway. He tried to position himself as the witness so he would not be treated as the suspect. It did not work because the evidence did not allow it. "No. Your husband's hands were not clean. The money that moved through those accounts caused real harm to real people. To staff whose retirement funds disappeared. To suppliers who were never paid. To families who had nothing to do with the politics of this building." The chairman's voice was not triumphant. It was tiring. If you raised your children with only half the story, you raised them in a grief that was real but in a guilt that belonged to someone else. "No," but this time the word sounded like a question. "You came here to avenge a man whose full history you did not understand, and today you almost added another crime to a history that was already complicated enough." Mrs. Kwon's tears fell harder, but her face had changed. The anger was still there. But confusion had entered it. Shock. A devastation of someone who has spent years building a story and just felt the foundation move. For a moment, Anna almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then she remembered the chairman's hand at his throat and the sound of breaking glass, and the feeling passed. "Take her out," the chairman said to security. "He is lying. He is protecting himself." He has always protected himself, but her voice no longer carried the same force as before. The certainty was gone. What remained was grief, and grief without certainty has no sharp edges. They led her toward the door. Beatrice looked away. Sandra stood rigid. Linda had started crying. Rita hugged herself. Anna remained where she was, completely still, watching the door long after Mrs. Kwon and the security team had gone through it. Then there was silence. The kind of silence that comes after truth has broken something that will not be repaired in one afternoon. The days that followed were wrong in the way that a building feels wrong after one of its supporting walls has shifted. Work continued. Meetings were held. The Autumn Collection campaign, Hinyo, a tribute to Korea's diving women, shot in collaboration with a Ghanaian textile house, Anna's idea, approved 9 months ago after 3 rounds of resistance from Sandra, was still scheduled to launch in 6 weeks. Nothing stopped. But everything was different. And then there was the question of Park Ji-won. He had joined the company 4 months ago as a junior creative consultant. He was quiet, technically brilliant, and seemingly indifferent to the particular social architecture that the Seo daughters maintained on the executive floor, the invisible rankings, the careful distribution of attention, the unspoken rule that certain people were worth impressing and others simply were not. Anna had noticed him on his 3rd day, not because he was handsome, though he was, in the unhurried way that people are handsome when they are not thinking about it, but because he had left a comment in the margin of a brand strategy document that was simultaneously the most accurate and most ignored observation she had read all year. The campaign speaks to aspiration but not to inheritance. Who taught these women that this was beautiful? She had walked past his desk that afternoon and said, without stopping, "Good margin note." He had looked up. They deleted it in the next draft. "I know, I put it back." That was how it started. Not with drama. With a margin note and someone who bothered to put it back. Sandra noticed Park Ji-won first, the way Sandra noticed everything that was new and potentially useful. She began to include him in after-hours strategy sessions that technically did not require a junior consultant. She began to laugh more loudly when he spoke. She began, in small and plausibly deniable ways, to make him feel that his future at Seo Mirai had a shape that was contingent on her goodwill. Linda followed, because Linda always followed Sandra, and because Ji-won had a quality she could not name but kept returning to, a seriousness that looked like stillness but was actually attention. He listened to people the way that most people in that building did not bother to. Even Rita, who prided herself on being immune to the kind of entanglements her sisters walked into, found reasons to appear wherever Ji-won happened to be working. Anna watched all of this. She said nothing. She had too much work and too little patience for competition she had not asked to enter. But on a Thursday evening when the floor was nearly empty and she was still at her desk reviewing campaign footage, Ji-won came and stood at the edge of her workspace. He did not pretend he had happened to pass by. "Can I ask you something?" "You're already asking." He sat down across from her, uninvited but without presumption. The Hinyo campaign. The Kentweave integration. The decision to shoot half the campaign in Accra. That was yours. It was a team effort, Anna said, not looking up from her screen. It was yours. I've read every draft. I know whose handwriting is whose. She looked up then. Not because she was flattered. Because something in the way he said was simply accurate, and she had been in Seoul long enough to know that accuracy, in her direction, was not common. "What's your question? Why does Sandra present it as though she built it?" Anna held his gaze for a moment. "Because she can, and because I let her. For now. For now I'm doing a lot of work in that sentence." "Go home, Ji-won," she said. But there was no edge in it. He stood. And at the door he turned back. For what it's worth, the woman in the Accra footage, the grandmother braiding the model's hair before the shoot, that was the best frame in the entire campaign. Nobody else would have thought to include it. He left. Anna sat with that for a long time before she went back to work. What no one on the executive floor had thought to ask, because no one had thought it was relevant, was who Park Ji-won actually was. The answer arrived on a Tuesday, 7 weeks after the funeral incident, in the form of a man named Chief Han who walked into the chairman's office without an appointment and was admitted anyway, because he was the kind of man who got admitted. Chief Han was the patriarch of the Han family, one of the 3 founding shareholders of Seo Mi-rae Beauty, whose equity had been quietly diluted over decades of corporate restructuring until it existed only on paper. He was also, as he made clear within the first 4 minutes of the meeting, Park Ji-won's grandfather. Ji-won had not come to Seo Mi-rae as a junior consultant. He had come as the heir to a founding family's claim, wearing a temporary title and a borrowed desk, because Chief Han had wanted someone inside the building who could see clearly before the legal teams began to move. The chairman said nothing for a very long time when Chief Han finished speaking. "How long has he been here?" "Long enough," Chief Han said. The news moved through the executive floor the way news always moves through buildings full of ambitious people, not as an announcement but as a vibration, a change in air pressure, a series of small behavioral shifts that told you something structural had changed before anyone could explain what. Sandra found out through a contact in law. She called Linda immediately. Linda told Rita. All 3 of them arrived at the same understanding within an hour: the man they had been performing for, maneuvering around, treating as an audience for their particular brand of executive grace, was not a junior consultant. He was a principal. He was, in fact, more consequential than any of them had understood. And they had let him see exactly how they behaved when they thought the audience did not matter. Sandra processed this by going very still. Linda processed it by going home early. Rita processed it by submitting 2 weeks of sick leave. Anna found out because Ji-won told her himself. He came to her desk again on a Wednesday evening, same time as before, same unhurried quality. He sat down without being invited. And he told her everything: Chief Han, the shareholding history, the reason he had come, the reason he had stayed longer than the original plan required. "Why are you telling me?" Anna said when he finished. He looked at her for a moment. "Because you're the only person in this building who treated me the same on day 3 as you would have on day 100 if you'd known everything." Anna said nothing. "You put my margin note back. You didn't ask what it could do for you. You just put it back because it was right. That's not an extraordinary thing to do." "No, but it's a rare one." She looked at him. There was something in his face that she recognized, not vulnerability exactly, but honesty. The transparency of someone who has spent months behind a construction and is tired of maintaining it. "I'm not interested in being a reward, not for your honesty and not for whatever conclusion you've reached about my character. I know. And whatever happens between your family and this company, it shouldn't come to you through me. I know that too. Then what do you want?" He didn't answer. When he did, his voice was quiet. "To keep talking to you. Plainly. Without anything in the way. I have a deadline on Friday. I'll be out of your way before then." She looked back at her screen. "The grandmother in the Accra footage," she said, without looking up. "That was my grandmother. I didn't tell the director. I just asked if she could sit there while they braided." Ji-won said nothing for a moment. She looked like she knew every secret in the room. She does, she always has. He left without making it into more than it was. Which was, Anna thought, after he had gone, exactly the right thing to do. The board meeting was scheduled for the following month. Chief Han's legal team had filed the documentation. The chairman's advisors were reviewing the founding agreements. The question of the Han family's diluted shareholding, and what restitution or restoration might look like, was now a formal matter with formal stakes. Sandra, Linda, and Rita returned from their various retreats of processing. They came back changed in small but real ways. Sandra was quieter in meetings, which made her sharper. Linda listened more before speaking. Rita stopped performing and started working, which turned out to suit her better. Beatrice Sao moved through the building with more silence than before. She had not told anyone about the evening she had stood outside Jiwon's temporary office with a document she did not need to deliver, convincing herself it was professional. She knew what she had almost become in that moment. It humbled her in a way that public difficulty never could. The chairman changed too. He did not become soft, he had not built what he had built by becoming soft, but his pride took a wound that taught him something. He began looking at his building differently. Watching who was in the rooms he did not usually enter. Listening for the names that never came up in presentations but appeared in every margin note that turned out to be correct. Anna's name appeared in 4 of those notes in 1 month. He called her into his office on a Thursday afternoon. She came without anxiety and without performance, which he registered immediately. The Hino campaign. Yes, Chairman. It was yours. It was a team effort. I am going to stop allowing that particular team effort to be presented the way it has been presented. Anna said nothing. You should have been credited from the beginning, he said. Yes, I should have been. You're not going to pretend otherwise. I was taught not to pretend, by a woman who knew every secret in every room she ever sat in. He understood she was not talking about the company. Your grandmother. Yes. She raised you well. She raised me to be present, Anna said. And to wait. And to trust that what is true does not need to be performed. The chairman sat back. For a moment he looked less like a chairman and more like a man who had been in a building with the same people for so long that he had forgotten to look at them clearly. What do you want from this company? He asked. Anna looked at him without blinking. Creative director, she said. African-Korean market. Not as a consultant. Not as a liaison. As the head. That's a new division. Yes, it is. Write me a proposal. I wrote it 6 months ago, it's been sitting in Sandra's pending folder. She left his office. In the corridor she passed Jiwon, who was coming from the other direction with a folder of his own. They looked at each other for a brief moment. How did it go? He asked. Ask me again in 3 weeks. He nodded. Then, just before she turned the corner, Anna. She stopped. For what it's worth, whatever happens with the Han claim, whatever my grandfather decides, whatever the lawyers settle, I want you to know that this company is better because you're in it. That has nothing to do with my family or your proposal or the campaign. It's just true. Anna looked at him across the corridor. In the carefully maintained quiet of the Sao Mirai executive floor, with its marble surfaces and curated scent and all the invisible architecture of power, she felt something settle in her chest. Not resolution. Not romance. Something quieter than both. The particular warmth of being seen by someone who was not looking for anything back. Go file your paperwork, Jiwon. He smiled, real, earned. Yes, ma'am. The Hino campaign launched on a rainy Thursday, across 12 markets simultaneously. The frame that ran longest in every review, the one that journalists kept returning to, the one that made the campaign something more than beautiful advertising, was the one of the grandmother. An old Ghanaian woman with silver locks and hands that had braided 1,000 heads, sitting calmly beside a Korean diving woman in a studio in Accra, both of them looking at something just outside the frame. Not posing. Not performing. Simply present. The caption beneath it, in Anna's own handwriting, rendered in Chi and Korean and English, read: She knew before you arrived. She will know after you leave. This is what it means to carry something real. The chairman framed it and placed it in his office. Sandra requested that her name be included in the credits. For the first time, Anna said no. And on the evening the campaign went live, Jiwon found Anna standing at the floor-to-ceiling window of the creative department, watching the Han River catch the city lights. He stood beside her. Close but not too close. It landed well. It did. They stood in the city light together for a moment. Then she said, without turning, "Ask me for coffee." Not tonight. Not while the campaign is still trending. Not while your family's legal matter is still open. When all of that is settled and there is nothing in the way. Jiwon was quiet for a second. Okay. She nodded once. He did not push it further. And that was, Anna thought, the thing about a man who had been paying attention. He understood that the most patient love is the one that knows how to wait. Months later. A quiet cafe in Mapo Gu, raining. 2 cups of coffee. 1 margin note on a napkin slid across the table. She read it. She looked up. You know I'm going to put this one back too, she said. He smiled. I was counting on it.